Hello. So you join me in this pretty glorious midsummer's day. Oh fuck, that's rubbish. What should I say? Hi. You join me in the middle of a field. So the plan today is that I'm going to start painting again. That's the idea. I guess you could say I'm a digital artist by profession. I get to work with lots of really talented artists on my team. But yeah, everything we create is in the digital realm. Yeah, and for a while now, I've been meaning to pick actual paints back up again because I love them and I haven't done it in ages. And what's more, you know, I've heard so much about what artificial intelligence is going to do to art in general and creativity, and especially, well, I guess all of the parts of art and creativity that exist in the digital world. So this is perhaps me saying, okay, let's go rediscover the stuff that a machine absolutely can't do. The thing that you do with your hands, with actual human hands and paint and paper. And yeah, so let's see how we get on. Okay, so here's my canvas layout. I've blocked in some really rough, loose sketch lines just to call out the shape of the space, but kept it super loose, like it's just a couple of lines really, just to help me understand how the composition should work out once we're finished. I mean, we're going to be painting over all those lines anyway, so they're not that important other than getting that rough composition in place. And then the first thing I'm doing with the paint, other than freaking out about the fact that I'm a massive fraud and I don't know how to do any of this painting stuff, is trying to work out the bits that are in light and the bits that are in shadow, because as all great painters know, that is the most important thing in a painting, is to try and work out that relationship between things that are in light and things that are in shadow, because ultimately that's going to give you the shape of everything. At least that's the theory. And it's something that I definitely need to get better at. But hey, here's me working through that process. I'm also picking a kind of interesting palette. I'm going for things like purples and blues in the shadows, mainly because I'm trying to capture that sort of heat that was there on that day. And also I think it's fun to play with palette in that kind of a way. I mean, if I wanted to get it exactly like the real thing, I'd take a photo. And I think half the fun of painting is to try and draw out some of the details and some of the colours that you just wouldn't get unless you were doing it in paint. And some of that is, you know, about translating what you see with your eyes. A camera lens is an amazing thing, and it picks up huge amounts of detail, especially if you've got a fancy camera. But they are limited, you know, they have dynamic range limitations that the human eye doesn't have, and I think there's something about the way a human eye processes an image and the way that image is stored up in your head and the way you see it that's super unique, and that's the thing that I think is amazing about painting when it's done well, is that you get some of those qualities come through that you just can't capture with a camera. So I think it's going kind of well. I've not entirely forgotten how to use a paint brush and actual paint, it turns out. So this is where we are. This is roughly the composition that we're working with. So we've got this big old tree here, and it goes down to a few little smaller trees, and then it darts off into this cool little line, like hedgerow over there. Because my setup still has not got a proper setup for the easel itself, I'm sat on the floor. But the kind of cool thing about sitting on the floor means that I've got all these nice silhouettes from some of these tall grasses here, which is giving like a nice bit of composition coolness. So that's kind of what we're working with. That's the sort of breadth of the scene. Here we go. So this is kind of where we're working at the moment. So we got a big old tree at the top there, sort of petering off into the smaller ones. Trying to get this separation, this bit of shadow in the foreground versus the background, to give that nice sort of swoosh that's going on. And then yes, using some of these small grasses to start creating some shadow and just general compositional interest. So I think now I'm sort of going to try and wrap this up fairly quick. The idea really is just to start layering on some of the detail of some of the high frequency stuff, like all the grasses in the foreground, and just picking up on some of the more interesting edges on the tops of the trees. And just start layering up some of the shapes. I have to say, this gouache stuff, I'm unconvinced so far. It dries so quick. So maybe I need to rethink that, or I need to just switch up the technique even more. But that's the only downside. Kind of like the way the colours are coming out. That's cool. And so I'll carry on, and we'll see where we end up in the next hour or so. So at this point, I'd like to put a bit of a disclaimer in place and a bit of an apology for some of the shonky camera work and some of the audio issues. Like, I know there's a ton of wind noise. I've never done this sort of thing before, and I've been getting plenty of tips from Mrs. Penrose, who has done this sort of thing a ton of times before. So yeah, she's given me plenty of advice, and I'm going to roll that into the next time I do this and make sure it feels a lot more pro. I'll have a few more bits of gear with me as well that will make setting up the camera a bit better. But yeah, at this point I'm just doing more and more of what I was doing previously, but slowly trying to increase the resolution by using smaller and smaller brushes and making the marks smaller, so you're picking up on different types of detail. So rather than it being the sort of big shapes now, I'm thinking about some of the shadow and light that's falling in amongst some of the tall grasses, and just trying to get a sense of how that space works and the sort of depth that's there in real life, as well as starting to bring out some of those more sort of orangey tones in some of the grasses and the trees from the fact that it's such a hot, scorched day. We've had not a lot of rain for a while, so everything's pretty dry. Just trying to pick out some of the detail here with the way some of the light's starting to come through the leaves and the branches on the trees. Also, just adding a bit more white into the sky to really sort of give that bleached out look. And at this point, I'm just fettling, I'm just playing. To be honest, this is the bit that I always really love about a painting. It's tricky not to get to the point where you feel like you're overworking it. But this is the stage where you kind of feel like you have a successful painting, and it's just about refining it and doing the fun finishing touches that bring the whole thing to life. This was a pretty quick one, and you know, it was fairly loose and sketchy. If I would be doing this at home and I'd be spending maybe a couple of days putting something together, then I'd spend obviously a lot more time refining the whole thing. But for now, I just wanted to get something down on paper nice and quick. Okay, so I think I'm going to call it here for a day now. I'm actually kind of happy with this. It wasn't as terrible as I thought I was going to be. I thought, well, I am pretty rusty, and I'm not convinced about some of these paints. They dry very quick, so I might have to try some different ones. But yeah, managed to get like a nice bit of some interesting relationships between light and dark, and managed to pull some interesting colours out of the scene. Like it's super burnt out at the moment. We've not had a lot of rain for a while, so everything's kind of got that yellowish orange kind of tinge to everything. You sort of look at it and you expect trees to, in your head the trees are green, but actually if you spend a couple of minutes looking at it. They're kind of not at the moment, they're sort of a dusty, orangey, greeny, yellow type thing. And there were some fun colours to mix. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to take this back to the house, tidy everything up because I've made a massive mess, and then I'll try and get some nice clear images of the final thing. So that was pretty good. Got to meditate on colours and paints for a good couple of hours. Got to be in a nice chill spot, nobody around. Feel pretty good after that. I think some of the things I'm going to do different next time, I'm definitely going to look into seeing if there is some sort of medium that I can mix up with the gouache paints, because they dry so quick. Basically had one chance to lay down one set of a particular colour, and then the next time you go back to it, it'd be completely dried out. So maybe I'm doing something wrong there. I need to work out how to make that a bit more manageable, because it was a bit of a pain. Other than that, the colours seem to have come out quite nice. I've definitely got a lot to learn when it comes to working with gouache. And also just to be way more prepared. I thought I brought everything with me, and then I ended up thinking I was missing pots for water to go into, and then because I didn't have the right tripod and stuff, I managed to tip water on myself twice, which was fun. Managed to lose things in long grass, but it all came up okay in the end. So I'm going to walk back now and enjoy a late summer afternoon, and then yeah, we'll see what we do next.